bone-chilling wail pierced the tranquil silence of the wooded park. The hair on the back of my neck rose, and a wave of goose flesh pebbled down my forearms, making me feel like death had just whispered sweet nothings into my ear. "That was a hunting horn," Ryu growled, gripping the hilt of his katana. "A call to war." Then I heard sudden screams, cries, shouting, and whistling shrieks coming from around the corner. I instinctively drew my sword halfway from its sheath and took a hasty step closer to the carnage. Ryu halted me and placed a reassuring hand on my fist, shaking his head in silent warning for me not to reveal our presence to the battle raging ahead. I let out a nervous breath, agreeing with his logic as I tried to peer through the trees and get a glimpse of the mayhem that had shattered the park's peaceful atmosphere. I was familiar enough with the surrounding area to know that just ahead, the park opened up onto a field with a sheltered cookout area and picnic benches. Perfect for an ambush. The smell of burning meat drifted through the trees, smelling unnervingly savory, almost causing me to gag when I entertained the thought that it was likely burning bodies. I tried to convince myself that it was merely some kid's birthday party, but that horn had been dark and foreboding and malevolent. This was no birthday party. I was certain that one of the sins had tracked me, or lucky, here, and if there was a birthday party ahead, that demon was likely attacking the children and parents with monstrous creatures of fangs and claws and hunger. The remaining 6 sins would do anything to get their claws on Lucky. The cries of the innocent ripped at my ears, and I realized I was panting hoarsely. It sounded like all hell was breaking loose. It probably was. I let Ryu take the lead as I embraced my magic and gritted my teeth. I could use a little slaughter to perk me up. I hadn't had my coffee yet. I loved the smell of demon disembodiment in the morning, I mused aloud, taking a deep breath. Ryu flashed me a cold, wicked smile and a faint nod. Then he crouched low and crept off through the trail through the trees, climbing a short hill towards the chaos. I gave him a few steps lead before following. Ryu reached the top of the hill in view of the carnage and abruptly froze. His tense muscles slackened and he shot me a very puzzled look from over his shoulder, before motioning for me to join him. I jogged up, warily, ready to kick some ass. As I crested the rise, I shifted my attention from him to assess the field of at least 200 people, and a dizzying display of cosplay outfits were running around like maniacs. They were all armed with brightly colored guns, rocket launchers, bows and arrows, and spears. "Are those Nerf guns?" Ryu asked, baffled by the hundreds of foam projectiles hissing and whistling through the air. I nodded numbly, my brain fizzling out and smoking like an overtaxed computer. "I think so," I said, watching a young child dressed up like a white lion shooting a woman dressed like... "Hey, she kinda looks like me," I snapped in an affronted hiss, pointing out a young woman with long white hair. "She even has my Templar scarf." I pinched the edge of the scarf hanging down my chest, comparing it with the now fallen Nerf warrior. As I swept my attention across the field of revelers, I found myself vaguely recognizing a few more costumes. I saw skeletons, warriors, fairies, about a dozen trench coats, and even a few attempts at a winged unicorn with red orbs on the tips of his long black feathers. Just like Grim, Nate Temple's unicorn. I blinked, noticing the sheltered area full of park benches where more people were eating, recording the Warzone on their cell phones, manning the barbecue grills, or drinking beer. A large banner hung from the rafters that read, "Friendsgiving." "Friendsgiving?" I murmured with a frown. "What sorcery is this?" "That doesn't even make any sense," Ryu grumbled. "None of this makes any sense." "That one looks like me," he said with an offended scowl. "Well, a ninja with a black sword at least," he grumbled. "It's like the Twilight Zone," I agreed. I studied the horde of miscreants and noticed a tall, bearded blonde man apart from the others, spinning in a slow circle with his cell phone held out in front of him. In the span of 5 seconds, he took at least a dozen selfies from every angle imaginable, posing with his Nerf gun, even though he wasn't participating in the battle. I pointed at him for Ryu. "See the wannabe Zoolander Viking? He looks nothing like Gunner. He didn't even wear an eye patch." Ryu shook his head with a grunt. "Selfies." He spat on the ground to emphasize his disgust. I nodded my agreement, searching for any other ne'er-do-wells. "You see that creepy guy with the goatee?" I asked, pointing at a man with a perpetual mischievous smirk who was talking to a group of cosplayers under the shelter. He looked like an evil Bond villain, narcissistic beyond all measure. You could just tell. I didn't trust him one bit. He had a white leather satchel over one shoulder, just like the one I had given Nate. My breath caught, and I found myself backing away, wondering if this was some sort of demonic trap or fey illusion. This place is evil. Do you sense any magic? Ryu's attention was locked onto a section of the tree line a few hundred feet away. No, but I see a cowboy in pirate boots, he growled in displeasure. I followed his gaze to see a man lurking in the shade of the trees, much like us. He wore a long, dark trench coat with the collar pulled up to conceal his face, and a 10-gallon cowboy hat. Most of him was concealed by shadows, but I saw another familiar figure beside him, who was doing his best to hide behind the cowboy after noticing our attention directed their way. I scowled, pointed directly at him, and crooked my finger. Kane wilted guiltily and nudged his partner with a defeated slump to his shoulders. The cowboy hat turned my way, and I caught a glimpse of Xylo, also known as Abel, as in Cain and Abel, the infamous brothers. Xylo's skull was marked with marble striations of gleaming silver, like it had been shattered and glued back together. He grinned and waved before making his way towards us, keeping to the trees and out of sight of the park's revelers. These friends-giving demons. The brothers finally reached us, and I noticed them both assessing me up and down, looking relieved at what they saw, which was instantly suspicious. Before I could interrogate them on their strange behavior, and their presence, Ryu leaned forward, pointing at the crazies. Who are they? Why do they look familiar? And why are you watching them? Kane shrugged, glancing at the crowd with a disappointed look. It looked like they were reloading and lining up for another round of battle. We were looking for the naked preacher. Have you seen him? My mouth clicked shut and I blinked a few times, struggling to make sense of his question. What? I demanded, shooting a panicked look at the Friendsgiving crowd. There were kids there. I didn't see a naked preacher, but the tall Viking guy was now standing on a picnic table to get a fresh angle on his 500th selfie. I flinched to see that the creepy goatee guy had apparently noticed us, and was furiously scribbling something on a pad of paper as if his life depended on it. Like he could hear us, and was transcribing our conversation. I shuddered at the thought, and motioned for my crew to slip back down the hill and out of sight of the mad scribbler. We haven't seen any preachers. Kane muttered unhappily. Damn. Is that why you two are out here? Bird watching? I asked dryly. Kane's humor evaporated and his face grew grim. Xylo was the one who answered me, though. We came to warn you about the two nightmares who escaped Fae. A few of those people wore armor that looked eerily similar to the descriptions we were given, but they were just costumes. Who told you this? I hissed, beginning to panic at the thought of nightmares running loose. What are nightmares? Ryu asked in a concerned, foreboding tone. I had come here to find Lucky. I didn't have time for this shit. I heard Kane giving Ryu a short explanation of just how bad this news was. I began to pace, my shoulders growing tense at the thought of bloodthirsty nightmares loose in Kansas City. The famous Knights of the Round Table had been cursed and brainwashed and were supposed to be locked up in a magical slumber until Nate Temple found time to heal them from their cursed armor. They were nigh invincible, according to Nate and Gunnar. That was the last thing I needed. Is that why you came up with the brilliant plan to bring Xylo out in public? I asked in a warning tone. Xylo misread my tone, nodding matter-of-factly. Yes, my disguise is unbreakable, he said, flipping out the tail of his coat with a proud smile. I chose not to break the skeleton's heart. We wanted to keep an eye on you in case the nightmare chose to hunt you down, he said. Zanwu told us you came to the park with Ryu for a little struggle snuggling. The innocent tone to his words made my cheeks flush crimson, knowing that everyone else understood the double entendre, even if Xylo did not. Kane coughed, clamping his lips shut as if his life depended on it. Ryu arched an eyebrow, staring from Xylo to Kane with a startled look. Struggle snuggling? I hissed in an icy tone, glaring directly at Kane and resting my hand on the hilt of my katana. Xylo nodded, still not reading the figurative rune very well. The Forbidden Polka, he said, pointing at our swords. Training Ryu's privates. Kane burst out laughing at the last one, doubling over. I can't take it anymore, he wheezed. Ryu was struggling to bite back a grin of his own, but I felt like my face was aflame with embarrassment. We came here to practice our swordsmanship, not the Forbidden Polka. Kane laughed even harder, crashing to his knees. Xylo frowned at his brother and then at me. I see, he said in a dark tone. Before Sheriff Xylo could enforce justice, I snatched his wrists and shook my head. I need you to head back to Castle Dracula and make sure everything is buttoned up tight. We can't have nightmares showing up there and causing havoc. We'll meet you there soon. Kane nodded. We'll be more discreet. Let's go, Xylo. Leave them to their struggle snuggling. He tugged Xylo away before I could punch him in the mouth, and the two of them were jogging through the trees and over a hill, away from the Friendsgiving crowd before I could chase them. I turned to look at Ryu. He shrugged. So... Not another word, Ryu. We spent the next 10 minutes walking and talking as I brought him up to speed on the nightmares, and how freaking dangerous they were. Ryu, if anything, only looked more eager to cross swords with one. Men. After a few more minutes, I let out a grin as I recognized we were close to one of my favorite fountains. A beautiful angel statue with outstretched wings stood over a wide pool of water, looking like she was singing a hymn. I motioned for Ryu to follow me, but he took it as a reason to sprint ahead of me to make sure the coast was clear. That's when I heard it. Someone was singing a raucous, highly inappropriate rap song just around the corner. Ryu shot me a suspicious look, and then walked around the corner of our path to enter the clearing with my angel fountain. I stepped up beside him, wanting to get a good look at the terrible singer before he realized he had an audience. I stared, dumbfounded, to see the tall, blonde-haired man perched atop my angel statue in the center of the fountain.
Okay, I found this on the web for tall blonde-haired man perched. Check it out.
Jesus. I stared, dumbfounded, to see the tall, blonde-haired man perched atop my angel statue in the center of the fountain. He was standing on her shoulders, balanced precariously, and from the waist up he looked like a preacher. He wore a clergy collar and the typical coat and shirt, although crookedly buttoned. From the waist down, however, he was entirely nude. We had found the naked preacher and his holy grail. He also held an impossibly long, gaudy, bedazzled leash in each hand. The leashes drooped down low enough to reach the wide pool before connecting to... God damn it, Lucky, I wheezed. Ryu looked like he'd been kicked in the nuts while hearing factual evidence that Buddha was actually a genocidal maniac. Because Lucky had the two divines we just saved from purgatory on leashes. Fucking leashes. Zoe, the giant vermilion bird, was currently on fire, even though she was standing in the pool of water. The water was boiling and steaming all around her, transformed into a hot spring from her flames. Bai, the white tiger, was pouncing about in the water at imaginary prey. Zanwu and Kinglong were going to be so pissed. Lucky finally noticed us and grinned toothfully as he gave Bai's leash a fresh, playful tug. "I'm the Tiger King, bitches!" And that was the moment two joggers rounded the corner on the opposite side of the fountain, came to an abrupt halt, and gawked at the half-naked creature and his two terrifying monsters in the fountain. The two of them screamed bloody murder. Bai roared loud enough to pass for an oncoming train, and Zoe instinctively belted out a ball of fire directly at the joggers. You guys are going to love the rest of Trinity. Thank you.